All right, let's try this now. All right, Rufus, let me know if you now. Okay, cool. Sorry about that. All right, let me rewind. What I was saying was Happy New Year to everybody. However you chose to bring in the new year, I pray it was a good moment for you, you and your families. As I was saying, we're starting a new book today, and we're going to be in the book of Habakkuk. And Habakkuk is a very interesting character because he finds himself in the middle of a situation where the children of Israel are getting ready to go into. Good morning, be good to see you all. Getting ready to go into Babylonian exile, right? So he's one of the last prophets to speak. He comes on the scene between Jeremiah and Ezekiel. Now, you guys remember Jeremiah, the famous passage that everybody loves to quote and get tattoos and bumper stickers and put on t-shirts and all of this, and they slap it on every situation out of context. But Jeremiah 29:11, where the Lord speaks through Jeremiah and says, I know the plans that I have for you, plans to prosper you, and all of this stuff, right? So Jeremiah wrote that prophecy, or penned that prophecy, spoke that prophecy for the children of Israel going into exile. That was a promise that God gave to them while they would be in exile. Okay, so he speaks. Habakkuk shows up in between that moment and when Ezekiel started prophesying in Babylon. You find that in Ezekiel chapter 1. So again, roughly he shows up between 607 and 604 BC, not many years after fall of Nineveh, as it was captured by the, I believe it was the Chaldeans as well, the Babylonians. But nonetheless, like we saw last week in the book of Nahum. So again, that happened in 612. Boom, here comes 607. And here's where we find ourselves, right? And so historically, what was happening at the time is the Babylonian people, they were becoming a very large powerhouse. So they were, and we'll see it in a chapter, they were just scooping up land left and right. I believe it was the Assyrians fell to Pharaoh Necho and the Egyptians. And so Babylon began scooping up all this land. Okay, so there's a lot of events happening, right? There's a lot going on in nations around Habakkuk's time. A lot of war. There's a lot of sieges. There's a lot of invasions happening. And as we saw the destruction of Nineveh last week, again, a few years prior to Habakkuk, now Habakkuk is looking at this powerhouse nation who's just scooping up land left and right. And he knows that they're coming for the people of Judah next. And so I asked the question, what do you do when you find yourself in a situation and you're screaming at God, asking him to hear you, and he doesn't respond? How do you handle that? What do you do, right? What do you do when it seems like he's not listening, when it seems like he's silent? It seems like all of it, the ears have been turned off to you, and it feels like your words are not getting any further than your desk or the wall in your room. They're just not getting anywhere because there's not a response coming from him. Let's look at Habakkuk. Another thing that I want to point out here is that Habakkuk You guys remember King Josiah. King Josiah was one of the most upright kings to come through Judah. He's the one who found the book of the law, and he reinstituted the law of Moses, the practices that everyone was supposed to be doing. And unfortunately, while that was a great reformation for Josiah's time, once Josiah died, the movement stopped. And so Habakkuk has lived through the reform, right? He has lived through the moment where it looked promising for the people of Judah and the people of Israel. Man, we could really make a comeback, but then once he dies, once the king dies, well, then the people just go back to doing what they were doing in the first place. All right. And so now Habakkuk finds himself having lived through this moment, seeing the potential, right? To now, God is getting ready to send him into exile. And he finds himself in a place of bewilderment. He is a place of perplexity because he just cannot understand what is happening right now. And so another interesting note, and I'll just quote or just give you the passage to go read. Jehoiakim, who was one of the sons, I believe the second son of Josiah, he was put in place by Pharaoh Necho, who had invaded Judah. All right, he was put in place, and the text says in 2 Kings 23, beginning around verse 36, all the way into chapter 24, that this king Jehoiakim, he did evil in the sight of the Lord. Right. So although his father set a good example, he did evil. And he was responsible for putting heavy tax burdens on the people and all of this stuff while he lived luxuriously in his castle, in his palace. Everybody else in the land was starving. So it was a really, really jacked up situation right now that Habakkuk finds himself in. But now here he is, commissioned by the Lord and still having to function in obedience. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a very tough spot to be in. When nothing around you looks promising, nothing around you looks good, nothing around you looks like it's going to work, nothing around you looks like you may find a way out of this thing, whatever it may be, right? Every day, the forecast is dark. Every day, nothing looks good. Every day, nothing is desirable. Can you, when I see you, I see myself on the screen. And so just know I'm talking to me too. Can we function in obedience to the Father when life around us does not look promising? All right, let's get into the chapter. Beginning at verse 1, it says, the pronouncement that the prophet Habakkuk saw. How long, Lord, must I call for help, and you do not listen, or cry out to you about violence, and you do not save? Why do you force me to look at injustice? Why do you tolerate wrongdoing? Oppression and violence are right in front of me. Strife is ongoing, and conflict escalates. This is why law is ineffective, and justice never emerges, for the wicked restrict the righteous. Therefore, justice comes out perverted. So, again, Habakkuk finds himself in a moment of, God, I see all these things going on around me. It's wrong, right? I see that there is injustice happening. My people are being oppressed. There's a wicked king. There's a wicked king who's leading the nation right now, who's turning the nation away from you. All of these things, right? I'm calling out to you. Why are you not listening to me? The fact that Habakkuk says, how long, shows us that obviously this is not the first time that Habakkuk has cried out. This has been an ongoing thing, right? Again, remember, he lived through the reforms of Josiah. And now he finds himself under the leadership of a wicked king and the nation going completely left. All right. And so again, here he is crying out to God, trying to get an answer from him. He's stating his case. Everything around me, there's injustice, there's oppression, there's violence right in front of me. Why do you tolerate this? Why do you allow this to happen? One of the common misconceptions, first point I want to make, about this relationship that we have with the Lord is that because we've done such an abysmal job of describing what prayer is, and if you need more information on that, just go back about 3 weeks ago, and Brenton covered that, I believe, while we were still in Micah or Jonah. So go back and check that out. But one of the common misconceptions we make is that when we find ourselves in a moment of frustration or a moment of distress or a moment of fear and or anxiety, that when we call to the Lord, that he is immediately supposed to respond to us, right? It's a common misconception that God, I called to you, I need an answer right now. Exactly, Rufus. His back is up against the wall. He has nowhere to go. And I know that we too have all found ourselves in those types of situations. And so again, it's interesting the words that he uses here, because he says, why do you force me? So he begins to blame God for what he's seeing, although what he is seeing is the result of people's decisions, right? He's seeing the result of what it looks like when you have a wicked king whose heart is not following the Lord in place. What it looks like when there are people around you who are living in rebellion to the Lord and what he's instituted. But he says, why do you force me to look at this? Why do you tolerate wrongdoing? And he begins to say, this is why the law is ineffective. So Habakkuk's perspective at this moment, ladies and gentlemen, as we start this book off, his perspective is skewed. Because he's looking at everything around him and he begins to point the finger at God and say, God, why is this happening? Why is that happening? Why are you allowing this to happen? Have you ever been there? I know I have. You look around at your situation, you say, well, God, why are you letting this happen? Why are you letting that person get away with this? Why do they get to do this to me? And all the while, God's not responding to you. And so then that just further incites your anxiety because he's not responding. And so this is where he finds himself. It's where he finds himself with a skewed perspective of what's going on around him. All right. And what is happening is this situation is just the unfolding of a word that God already spoke. If you go back to Deuteronomy, you can begin in chapter 11. You can skip down to chapter 28 and chapter 29. God was very clear in the very beginning of what would happen to his people if they ever turned their hearts away from him. And I want to be very clear. Here is the grace of God and the mercy of God, right? Because the people's hearts started turning very, very early in this relationship. And truth be told, we can see from how they acted in the wilderness to how they acted when they got into the land, right? When they got into the wilderness, what were they always doing? Complaining about going back to slavery, right? Take us back to Egypt. This was way better for us, right? When they get into the land, oh, now we want to be like the nations around us. 1 Samuel chapter 8. Give us a king, not the Lord, but just give us a king so that we like the other nations. So again, their hearts have always been doing a slow move away from the Lord, right? God in his grace and God in his mercy. You guys remember that Nineveh, from the time that Jonah preached to the time that Nahum came around, they had 150 years to get it right. These people, the children of Israel, by the time that they go into Babylonian exile, it has been almost 500 years. 500 years, ladies and gentlemen. So again, what we see here is we don't see their heart turn and then God respond and say, that's it, you're out. No, we see almost 500 years of grace and mercy to these people. Right now, during this time, before they went into Babylonian exile, there would be some invaders that would come in and kind of ransack the city and stuff like that. God would use that to get their attention. But what's interesting is those invaders came to their land, but now they have pushed and pushed and pushed to the point that God is unfolding what he said would happen, which he said that every 7 years you are to let the land rest, right? You're supposed to follow me. You're supposed to serve me. You're supposed to do all of these things. If you do not, I will uproot you from the land and I will remove you and put you into exile. So what Habakkuk is experiencing, the beautiful thing about us today is that we have the whole canon, right? So we're able to look down the history and see all of these things. All Habakkuk could see is what he lived through with Josiah and then what was in now. He didn't have the book to go back and reference like we did, right? To go back and look at these events. Oh, well, this happened here. This king did this one did this. All it was what he had experienced and lived through. And so what he's experiencing at this moment is he is experiencing God being true to his word, although he doesn't see it that way. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to offer a challenge flag this morning to you. If you find yourself in the position, as I have, of Habakkuk, where you're going through a moment and your perspective is skewed, I want to throw a red challenge flag and say that what you might be witnessing, I'm not a prophet, but what you might be witnessing is not that God is doing anything outside of his will, or he's doing something specifically to you to maneuver you or to make you feel some type of way. Could it be that what you're seeing is simply the law of reciprocity? If we stop long enough and think, could it be that, number one, Habakkuk is outraged by what he's seeing, what's going on with the people around him. But again, what he's witnessing is the law of reciprocity. God said, if you do these things, this will happen to you. And so now Habakkuk is just watching that unfold. Although Habakkuk, who is an obedient servant to the Lord, although he may not have made those decisions, but the people as a whole did. And so now everybody's suffering because of it. So again, could it be that what you're seeing, even in your own life, could it just be the law of reciprocity playing out? Either by some decisions you've made, or maybe some decisions that some people close to you have made, and then now that it's affecting you. Who knows? Again, just on a challenge flag. So that's his perspective at this moment, that he is pointing the finger at God and saying, God, why are you allowing this? This and this is happening. I see all this stuff around me. I need you to do something. All right. So let's keep moving. Now we see God respond. Verse 5, it says, look at the nations and observe, be utterly astounded, for I'm doing something in your days that you will not believe when you hear about it. Now, I vaguely remember people will take things like this, these statements that God makes, because he made a similar statement in Isaiah where he said, behold, I'm going to do a new thing. And we think that it's talking about, a new season or this, that, and the third. No, it's not. it's talking about exactly what God made the statement for. So we can't take things like this and say, look at the nations and observe, be utterly astounded, leave all that out, and then just say, for I'm doing something in your days that you will not believe when you hear about it. You'll hear preachers say, see, God's getting ready to do something in your day that when he does it, you ain't even gonna believe that he gonna do it. And we apply those things to things that do not have to do with God's will for our lives, right? We just throw it out there because it sounds good and it sounds churchy. But what God was saying to Habakkuk here, it's not outside of his will for his people. All right. So we got to keep it in context. And so he says, look, I'm raising up the Chaldeans, or the Babylonians, that bitter, impetuous nation that marches across the earth's open spaces to seize territories not its own. They are fierce and terrifying. Their views of justice and sovereignty stem from themselves. So he's going to use the Babylonians. He's telling Habakkuk this, right? I'm going to use them, and I'm going to use these people. They don't even live by some of God's standards. They make the standard for themselves. Have you ever met anybody who creates their own standards? Like, they don't live by any principles, any creed, any code, and no, they make their own rules, as if they created the world, as if everything is supposed to function around them, and that's the code that they live by. Okay, well, these are the Chaldeans. These are the Babylonians, because they had risen in power to such a degree, nobody could stop them. Nobody could stand against them. When you heard the name the Babylonians, right? That was a problem. When you heard the Chaldeans, that was a problem. You know, for those that may be retired athletes now, or former athletes, we all have those experiences of teams that you would play, whether it's baseball, basketball, football, you ran in track, tennis, whatever. There were those certain opponents that it's just like, man, we got them on the schedule again. Because it didn't matter, right? Y'all could have practiced, watched the film 87 times, whatever. You could take the film home and watched it, but the team was just dominating. That's who the Babylonians were in this era. That's who they were. A nation that nobody could stand against. So God, he's really trying to get Habakkuk's attention here, but Habakkuk's not seeing it. And I'm going to show you why he's not seeing it. But he's saying, I'm going to take a nation who governs themselves. I'm going to take them, and I'm going to use them for my purposes. Right? Because that doesn't make sense. In our finite mind, that doesn't make sense. Wait a second. You mean to tell me a powerhouse nation, they don't listen to nobody, they do exactly what they want to do? This people, you're going to take this people and you're going to use them for your purposes. See, if you don't know the history of who he is, well, then these types of statements will not make sense to you. Right? You're trying to calculate and say, well, no. You mean to tell me that you're going to direct a nation who has no allegiance to anybody? Okay. All right. Verse 8 says, their horses are swifter than leopards and more fierce than wolves of the night. Their horsemen charge ahead. Horsemen come from distant lands. They fly like eagles, swooping to devour. All of them come to do violence. Their faces are set in determination. They gather prisoners like sand. They mock kings and rulers are a joke to them. They laugh at every fortress and build siege ramps to capture it. Then they sweep it by like the wind and pass through. They are guilty. Their strength is their God. Again, this is the team you don't want to play against. The day that you got to go up against that team, oh man, coach, I ain't feeling good. I'm sick. And you play both sides of the ball. Oh no, coach, I can't do it today. You know what's fixing to happen. So God is listing this out to Habakkuk and saying, I'm about to use this nation. Let's look at Habakkuk's response, and then let's let the text show why he missed it. Are you not God Are you not from eternity, Lord my God? My Holy One, you will not die. Lord, you appointed them to execute judgment. My rock, you destined them to punish us. Your eyes are too pure to look on evil, and you cannot tolerate wrongdoing. Here it is. So why do you tolerate those who are treacherous? Why are you silent while one who is wicked swallows up one who is more righteous than himself? Right over Habakkuk's head. You see, when you find yourself in a situation that is uncomfortable, a situation where you cannot understand, it is not important that we focus on what, but that we focus on who. I'll say it again. It's important not that we focus on what, but who. See, the Lord is trying to show Habakkuk something. He's trying to show Habakkuk this. The fact that everything looks out of control right now, Habakkuk. The land is doing what it's doing, and I'm about to bring this nation in to punish the land. Everything looks out of control. But what he wants to show Habakkuk is, although it may look out of control to you, it's not out of my control. Although you may not understand how it's going to happen, although you may not even agree with how I'm going to do what I said I'm going to do, it's not out of my control. And you see, Habakkuk so desperately wanted an answer from God, but when God answers him, he has a problem with how he responds. See, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't demand a response from God and then dictate what you want the response to look like. One or the other. Is it that you want him to respond, or is it that you want him to respond a certain way? You see, and so now God has responded to Habakkuk, and Habakkuk has a problem. Why do you tolerate evil? Why do you use someone who is even more wicked than we are? And I know we're bad, but why would you use these people, the Chaldeans? Why would you use them? Hold on, Habakkuk. You're talking out two sides of your mouth. On the opening verses, God, do something about the violence. God, do something about the wickedness that's going on. God, do something about this. God, do this. God. See, we do all these things. We scream at God and we yell and we're frustrated and we're mad and we say, God, do this, change this, do that, do something to them, do something to that person. But when God begins to try to get you to see things, you got a problem with it. He didn't expect Habakkuk to understand. He didn't expect Habakkuk to say, oh, that's a great idea, God. He doesn't need your co-signing. God doesn't need you to co-sign on his decisions. All he needs you to do is to trust his decisions. I'll say it again. God doesn't need you to co-sign on his decisions. He doesn't need you to agree. He doesn't care if you agree. All he asks is that we respond in obedience. That's it. And so while Habakkuk has lodged his case at the Lord and said, Lord, I need you to do something about this. And now the Lord told him, what did he tell him in verse 5, y'all? He said, look at the nations, observe, be utterly astounded, for I'm doing something in your days that you will not believe when you hear about it. Verse 13 proves God to be true yet again. Because the Lord said, I'm going to tell you this, but you're not even going to believe it. When I tell you, you're not going to believe it. So it's funny because God is so gracious that he gives Habakkuk an answer. I love that. I love the fact that although he knows Habakkuk is going to complain and that Habakkuk at first is not going to believe this, God is still gracious enough to give an answer. And I want to be very clear, y'all. I want to be very, 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 very clear. Isaiah chapter 55 and verse 8 and 9 says that his ways are not our ways. His thoughts are not our thoughts. as high as the heavens are above the earth, so his ways are higher than his ways, and his thoughts are higher than our thoughts. God does not owe you an explanation. Okay? Let me be very clear about that. God does not owe us an explanation. He doesn't have to explain himself to us. So when God chooses to explain himself to us, we should be grateful that he's chosen to do so, because he doesn't have to. He doesn't have to say anything to you, because again, he doesn't need your permission. He doesn't need you to co-sign. He doesn't even need you to amen him, because he is very sure of himself. He's got it under control. Psalm 30 says the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof and everything that dwells within. So he's got this thing on lock. All right. So we see this moment for Habakkuk, right? That he demands an answer. God says, you're not going to believe me if I tell you. Okay, well, I'm going to use Babylon. Why would you use this people? Right? I mean, good Lord. I look at myself in the mirror and it's just like, bruh, you've been here. You know what I'm saying? You're demanding something from God. God responds. And the fact that he doesn't respond the way that you think he should respond to you. Well, oh, that's not God. That's not God. Because God responds the way that I want him to do. He responds the way I think he should respond. Because he's supposed to do like this. No, he's not. God is going to respond in the way that he wants to respond, because he has the power to respond that way. It's called his sovereignty. And that's what he wanted to get Habakkuk to see. He wants Habakkuk to understand that although this nation, they govern themselves, they do what they want to do. I want to show you that I'm sovereign, that I can take a people, because don't miss it. Verse 11, the end of verse 11 says that they are guilty. Their strength is their God. Other translations, along the lines of the fact that they'll be held accountable, right? So they're going to get what's coming to them. But I'm going to show you just how much power I have, just how much ability I have, that I'll take a nation who is way more wicked than y'all are, and I'll use that nation to punish y'all. But then at the same time, I'll hold them accountable. And then at the same time, I'll still maintain my holiness and my justice. I will not compromise my holiness. I will not compromise my righteousness, because I'm going to use this other nation to deal with y'all. So he says, my holy one, right? I love Habakkuk's words. My holy one. Your eyes are too pure to look on evil. You right. But Isaiah 45 says that I created light and darkness. I created good and evil. So all of it's right here in his hand. You know, we sing the song growing up. He's got the whole world in his hand, right? We sing it, but we sing it because it's traditional. But do you really live like that? Do you really believe that he does, in fact, have the whole world in his hand? So when it looks out of control to you, does that mean that he's dropped the ball just because your life might be spiraling out of control right now? The situation around you might be out of your control right now. Does that mean that he's failed? No. Just life. But he's got it all in his hand, and he wants Habakkuk to see this. Understand, you can't do anything about what's happening, because this is like a slow snowball rolling down a hill. And as it continues to roll, it continues to get bigger because it picks up more snow. As it continues to descend, it picks up more speed. So the impact, whatever it hits, is going to be catastrophic. Y'all, this is a snowball that has started way back with the children of Israel. And so now Habakkuk's just seeing this thing out of control. And he's like, God, what do we do? And so again, he has a problem with how God has answered. And so I want to go to Job. I want to go to Job very quickly. Let me flip here, because we all know the story and we covered it in detail some years ago. But Job is 42 chapters long. The book of Job is 42 chapters long. For the first 37 chapters, what we see Job's lament. We see Job and Job's friends trying to talk to him and all of these different things. And finally, God responds in chapter 38. So I just want to read a few verses from 38, and then I want to go to 39, and then I want to show the shift. See, because sometimes God has to really remind you of who he is so that you understand, right? God wants to bring you to a place of understanding. And sometimes in order to get that understanding, he just has to reintroduce himself. Okay. So we know that Job had it bad, right? All of his kids died. His livestock was burned up. He became physically ill with boils and all this stuff. And his wife told him, hey, just curse God and die. All of these things. 38, the Lord speaks. Here's how he opens, right? And again, Job has been laying out his laments before the Lord. Then the Lord answered Job from the whirlwind. He said, who is this who obscures my counsel with ignorant words? Get ready to answer me like a man when I question you. You will inform me. Where were you when I established the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who fixed its dimensions? Certainly you know. Who stretched a measuring line across it? What supports its foundations, or who laid its cornerstone, while the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy? That's just how 38 opens. I mean, and the Lord he just starts going down this list. So let's jump over to 39. Check this out. It says, do you know when mountain goats give birth? Have you watched the deer in labor? Can you count the months they are pregnant? So you can know the time they give birth. They crouch down to give birth to their young. They deliver their newborn. Their offspring are healthy and grow up in the open field. They leave and do not return. Who set the wild donkey free? Who released the swift donkey from its harness? I made the desert its home and the salty wasteland its dwelling. Let's continue. Verse 29, it says, verse 26, it says, does the hawk take flight by your understanding and spread its wings to the south? Does the eagle soar at your command and make its nest on high? It lives on a cliff where it spends the night. Its stronghold is on a rocky crag. From there it searches for prey. Its eyes penetrate the distance. Its brood gulps down blood, and where the slain are, it is there. The Lord answered Job, will the one who contends with the Almighty, chapter 40, correct him? Let him who argues with God give an answer. Here it is. Job said, then Job answered the Lord, I am so significant. How can I answer you? I place my hand over my mouth. I have spoken once and I will not reply. Twice, but now I can add nothing. That's all he says. In between, God just really reminding him of his sovereignty and who he is. Then we get to chapter 42. So Job recognizes, right? Hey, I shouldn't have said nothing. Chapter 42, it says, then Job replied to the Lord, I know that you can do anything and no plan of yours can be thwarted. You asked, who is this who conceals my counsel with ignorance? Surely I spoke about things I did not understand, things too wondrous for me to know. You said, listen now, and I will speak. When I question you, you will inform me. I had heard reports about you, but now my eyes have seen you. Therefore I reject my words and am sorry for them. I am dust and ashes. How do you respond to that, right? So again, things were happening out of Job's control. He had an issue with how God was doing things. God responds, showing him, I'm sovereign. I'm in control. I've got this. And it leads Job to a place of understanding that my eyes have heard about you. My ears had heard reports about who you were, but now my eyes have seen you. Brought him to a place of turning the diamond and shifting his perspective. And even if you go back to chapter 1, what's interesting is that the enemy had a conversation with the Lord, and the Lord suggested Job, have you considered my servant Job? Right? One more place I want to look. We'll tie this thing up and then we're out of here. I want to go to Luke chapter 22, verse 31. And this is Peter's denial when Jesus tells him that Peter's going to deny him. He says, Simon, Simon, look out. Satan has asked to sift you like wheat, but I have prayed for you that your faith may not fail. And when you have turned back, strengthen your brothers. So we know the infamous story, right? He's going to tell him that the cock is going to throw, the rooster will crow 3 times, all these different things, right? When that happens, you're going to deny me 3 times. But I just want to point out this. That when he starts off the statement, he says, Satan has asked to sift you like wheat. And I only want to point this out because there is absolutely nothing, ladies and gentlemen, that happens in our world that gets by God or slides under his nose where he can't see it. Everything is subject to his permission on if he's going to allow it to happen or not. Everything that's going on in your life. I'm not saying that God is the cause of all of it, but what I'm saying is that it had to pass through his desk. And he had to either allow it to happen or not allow it to happen. So finally, I want to go to Isaiah. Isaiah chapter 26, and then we're out of here. All right. Verse 3, it says this, you will keep the mind that is dependent on you in perfect peace, for it is trusting in you. Trust in the Lord forever, because in the Lord himself is an everlasting rock. So again, as I mentioned earlier, I've said my final thought before I put it up and even really got to it. I mentioned it, but again, not what, but who. I don't know what your situation is today. I don't know proverbially how your back may be up against the wall. I don't need to know. But all I'm asking is that when you find yourself hollering and screaming at God, for God to change it, for God to do something, for him to work on somebody else, maybe we need to shift the diamond. All right? Maybe we need to turn the diamond and say, you know what? I don't need to focus on what's happening around me. See, because when you focus on what's happening around you, well, then the only thing that you have is the knowledge, your own knowledge based on what you see. Okay? But James says that if any man lacks wisdom, James chapter 1, verse 4, that he should ask of God who gives it generously. But the text goes on to say, and when you ask, you have to believe that he is. Because a double-minded man is unstable in all of his ways. So either you're going to look to him and trust him and allow him to keep your mind in perfect peace, or you're going to continue to look at the things around you, try to make sense of it, and then try to navigate through it in your own strength. You see, and an issue that you don't understand, your wisdom can't help you navigate. Habakkuk cannot be successful in this moment, operating just based off of what he sees. We cannot operate, ladies and gentlemen, based off of what we see. But we can operate effectively when we focus our eyes on who they need to be on, and that is on him. Because again, the text says you will keep him in perfect peace whose mind is stayed on you. So my encouragement is that wherever you find yourself today, that may you stay focused on him. The what will take care of itself. But as you stay focused on him, he begins to deal with you. Yeah, he begins to deal with you. So stop yelling at God and screaming and saying, God, well, why you allowing this to happen? Why you allow that to happen? Change this, change that. No. Let's be quiet. Put our focus on him. Ask him for the wisdom that we need to navigate, and listen for his voice. And where he puts his footprint and he picks up and he leads, we place ours right back in the same spot, and we stay in line with him. Paul encourages us in Galatians chapter 5, verse 26, after he lists the fruit of the Spirit, he says that since we live by the Spirit, let us keep in step with the Spirit. So wherever you find yourself today, ladies and gentlemen, may you keep in step with the Spirit. Let's pray. Lord, I thank you for your word. I thank you for your truth. I thank you for allowing us this opportunity, God, to look at Habakkuk, but not just to look at Habakkuk, God, but to look at ourselves. God, and I know that we all can attest to situations in our lives and yelling and screaming for you to change the situation or to change the people that are involved in the situations, when really the issue is not with what's going on around us. The issue is with us. And God, as you replied to Habakkuk and as you replied to Job and shifted their perspective, Father, I pray that I don't want to pray this, but I know it's the truth. That if you don't change the situation, God, that you change us. Because the 3 Hebrew boys said that we know that God is able to deliver. But even if he doesn't, let it be known, O King Nebuchadnezzar, that we did not bow down to your God. And it sounds so good, and it's so motivational in a very high moment. But God, these are prayers, and these are the parts of your word, God, that are tough when times are tough. And so I pray, God, that we'll not say anything that we don't mean, because we know that you're coming to see us. And we know, God, that our words fall in the melting pot for you to use. And so, Lord, I pray that you would help us, again, not to utter anything that we don't mean. Be with us, God. Give us the strength and the grace that we need to live a life of obedience to you. God, now I ask that you would be with Marcus and Brenton as they've already been preparing. God, speak to their hearts. God, give them what it is that you want them to say to us. And may your name be glorified and exalted above everything else. Thank you for another year, God. And I pray that this year we do our best to show you and show others that we love you. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. Appreciate you guys for being on this morning. It was a little bit earlier, but again, thanks for making the adjustment. Marcus will be on tomorrow morning, 7:15 a.m. in Habakkuk chapter 2, and then we'll hear from Brenton as he closes out Habakkuk chapter 3, and I forget what book comes next. I want to say Haggai or Zechariah, but anyway, we'll be in a brand new book next week. And so you guys, please go back and read the entire chapter, the entire book of Habakkuk. Great stuff. So you guys have a great day. Remember, if it sounds like Scripture, it must be found in Scripture. All right, guys, have a great day. Peace.